Welcome back to the Pair Program. I'm your host, Tim Winkler, joined by my co-host, Sean Leahy. Sean, it's grilling season, bud. Spring is in the air. Are you a big grill guy?
I'm definitely a fan of doing it. I don't think I'm any good, or it's edible at least. But I know some serious grillers who have personal secret level. Yeah, maybe Martine here, but they have these secret relationships with butchers and even direct ranchers to get their 20-pound briskets and whatnot. I'm not quite on that level.
Yeah.
But what about you, Tim? Are you firing up a smoker in the back?
Not a smoker. I got two grills. One's like a traditional gas grill, but then we've got a Blackstone. I think I got a couple of years ago for a birthday or something, but we bust that out for special occasions. A little bit of a pain to, you got to season it and get it, teed up. And then the cleanup's always a little bit of a hassle, but we'll do it for we're hosting for a brunch or breakfast. It's good. Or we did a hibachi night one night and it was fire.
That's sick. That's like the flat griddle setup,
the
right?
Flat griddle setup. Yep.
No, not I see the ones where you got to put the pellets in and it's like the smoker grill, combination.
Yeah, the smoker's a little bit, that's, those are guys that are ripping it for 14 hours on a brisket or something. It's Martine, you a griller?
I absolutely am. Being Argentinian American and being born and raised, that's kind of second nature for us.
It's a sin not to, right? Yeah. That's
in fact, yesterday night, my wife was like, "Hey, I'm craving some meat," and I was like, "Okay, let's fire up the grill."
I dig it, man. Well, yeah, it's that time of year, so hopefully, folks are busting out. There's the Traeger, I think, is the one that people get real into. There's full Instagram reels that just centered on Traeger. Cool. Well, let's give a little teaser for today's episode. Sean, we kind of went a little back and forth on this earlier, but it feels like, we're living in a world now that's dictated by data. Everything that we interact with, finance, logistics, everyday apps, all driven by data, constantly kind of updating in real time. Do you think we've hit a point where we have, more data than we actually know how to process effectively?
Oh yeah, of course. My inbox is a war zone, right? And beyond that, who even knows what to do with all the different RSS feeds you subscribe to, or just keeping up with the basics of it, let alone operating at scale. So we're completely inundated here, and I don't think that there's a way with classical systems to really break out of that. See the segue that I'm getting at here, Tim? So that's today. we're talking about some I'm practicing my segues all week. So, but yeah, I think that we're teasing the limits, especially with AI and all the new, frankly, data that's generating now as well. I read somewhere, I can't quote the source here, but I read somewhere that half of internet traffic is now agentic in some form or another, right? And that's distinct from your sort of traditional botnets or things like that. So if that's the case, there's no way that our sort of traditional or classical systems for data handling, data processing, storage management are going to be up to the task. So why not talk about quantum? Did I set you up well, Tim? I do well?
Sets me up well, man. You hit on it too. It's with AI, it's everything's just accelerating. And at some point, it's not just about collecting, information anymore, but can we actually process it fast enough, to kind of keep up? So yeah, you hit it, Sean. That's what we're digging into today. When complexity starts to outpace the tools that we've been relying on, and where something like quantum, might actually be, that path forward. And it's funny because, quantum, has this reputation of it's incredibly powerful, but it's also incredibly impractical for a lot of folks that have no idea on its capabilities. Kind of lives in this space where it's too technical for most operators, maybe too early for a lot of businesses. But just real enough that, the people feel like they should be paying attention to it. And so that's what we're going to get into today. Instead of talking about what, quantum might do someday, we're going to focus on where it's actually delivering value right now. And we've got a couple of great guests joining us to break some of this down. First off, we're joined by Martine Sajon, CEO and co-founder of Q99, who's building at the intersection of quantum and predictive intelligence. And alongside Martine, we've got Bill Collier, principal from Noblest Ventures, who's looking at this space through the lens of what's actually mission ready versus what's still kind of noise. So Martine and Bill, thanks for joining us on the pair program.
Thanks for having us.
Pumped to be here, guys. Pumped to be here.
Nice. All right. Let's kick things off with our little icebreaker segment here. Pair me up. Sean, why don't you lead us off? What do you got?
Boats and rivers. That's a little bit obvious.
I thought you say boats and hose. Boats and hose.
Boats and rivers, or rivers and boats. I've been in New York now for close to a month, coming home soon, but I had the opportunity to go take the East River Ferry across the East River when I was going to go check out Long Island City. And you pull away from the dock in Manhattan on East 33rd Street, and you have this incredible view of that entire skyline. So you see the Chrysler Building, Empire State Building, the UN, a bunch of other amazing pieces of architecture. And because that ferry is a commuter, instrument, they're just crushing it. I mean, they're flooring it across the East River. We crossed the bow of some pleasure craft, and you could see the captain on it, just see the weight coming to get him. He wasn't going to have a good day, but I enjoyed the ride. So boats and rivers is my pair up. Tim, what about you?
Yeah, boating season's coming up.
Before we move on, I think the idea of water taxis are completely underrated. Like, Tim, there's one like in Georgetown, right? To get from Georgetown to Old Town to National Harbor.
Yeah.
I've never done them, but I feel like from a commuter perspective, it actually saves a ton of time.
For sure, dude.
Oh, yeah.
I've hit that one from Old Town Alexandria to National Harbor many a times, and it's like, an hour time savings right there. It's insane. Yeah, boats and rivers. We've got a spot out in Chattanooga that we frequent, my family and I, and it's kind of right off of the Tennessee River. And don't own a boat. Best friends are the ones that own the boat, and you just participate with those friends. But we would rent like a pontoon and just cruise on the river, and just being on the water is just a different kind of energy. So
love a good
pontoon. I dig it. Yeah. All right. I'll jump in. I'm going to go with kind of, feeding off of the grilling season. I'm going to go with freshly cut grass and grilling out. So we live out in the burbs. We've got a decent backyard for the family, for the dog. And every Thursday we get the grass cut, and there's something about, just a fresh cut lawn that inspires me to fire up the grill, throw some steaks down for dinner. So we've been rolling out this new tradition in the Winkler household, where every Thursday get the fresh cut on the lawn, and then we grill out that night for dinner. And it's one of those small little, proud homeowner moments where you can kind of hang out on the deck, sip a beer while grilling, and just always appreciate like the fresh lines in a fresh cut lawn. So that's what I'm going with. I'm going with freshly cut grass and grilling out.
Tim, I think every dad listener to the pod just put on their New Balance shoes and pulled on their white tube socks and is ready to go out and crush a good mow.
Yeah, if this was a full body camera, you'd be seeing maybe it's Skechers. Maybe it's Skechers, not New Balance. Yeah. The slip-ins, right? 'Cause my back hurts. All right, let's pass it around to the guest. Martine, quick intro and your pairing for today.
Yeah. So Martin Sajon, co-founder and CEO of Ep99. Been building in the AI space for the past 10 years, and for the last 20 in the offensive security space. And my pairing, you're killing me, Tim, here, because my pairing was steak and wine.
Let's keep it going. You
can never go wrong with that combo. With a good cab, a good Malbec, being obviously born and raised in Argentina, Malbec gets kind of religion for us. So, a good ribeye with a good glass of wine. I'm my mouth is watering here.
Preach, man.
Ooh, you're killing me. It's like we are. What, 11:20? We'll fire the grill right now and get
to count down the hours, man. Got us all drooling over here. Yeah, and you nailed it. The
somewhere at the end of the day.
Ribeye, man. That's the best cut in my opinion too. And it's a Malbec for you, little Malbec combo. Yeah.
Now people are loving kind of Cab Franc. It's having a come up, but if you have a blend of Malbec and Cab Franc, that's killer.
Yeah. Yeah. Cab Franc's my wife's favorite. A lot of, Virginia grapes out here with that Cab Franc. So good stuff. All right. We got some food pairings already thrown around. Bill, what you got for us? Quick intro on your pairing.
Hey everyone, Bill Collier here, principal with Nobles Ventures. We are the strategic venture arm of Nobles, which is an engineering services firm. On the venture side, we're pre-seed to Series A focused, anything dual use that aligns with Nobles' mission. Typical check size is 500K to 2 million. And in terms of pairing, so this happened to me this morning, running around, dropping the kids off at school, got to the gym and noticed I didn't have my headphones. And it extremely, extremely difficult to like motivate myself to work out without my headphones. I did it. I raw dogged it. No headphones. I spent 30 minutes just singing songs in my head. But I'm telling you, it wasn't easy to freaking work out without my headphones. So my pairing's going to be working out or the gym and headphones.
Yeah, man. It's probably one of the most awkward situations to be in is in the gym without headphones, because you're just hearing, people grunting, and you can't block it out and just get dialed into your exercise. And it's a horrible mistake to make. I've done it once. Didn't forget them, but I just the headphones died as soon as I got there. And
worst
at
feeling.
that point, you're just on your own. Yeah, working out and headphones, man. Two key items need one another to get that workout in.
100%.
Good stuff. Well, yeah, enjoy having you guys join us. Looking forward to the conversation. So let's get into it. Just a quick reset for our listeners on what we're looking to cover today is, where, quantum is already kind of working, why a lot of people are still skeptical or maybe aren't believers in quantum just yet. And then, how companies can start moving toward it without, getting burned. And I'd love to, dial in a little bit more on that investor lens from Bill at some point on that. So let's get into a couple of these real use cases. Bill, just doing some research on Nobles. I wanted to start with some of the work stemming, from Nobles. You all patented a system around flight path optimization where you're combining, classical computing to generate options and quantum to determine the optimal maneuver. Can you help break down some of this? Why, maybe a supercomputer can't solve some of those problems on its own?
Yeah, totally, Tim. And I think we kind of touched on it in the introduction, but there's so much data out there, right? There's so much data. And when you're talking about flight optimization, you're talking about situations and scenarios where lives are in the balance, right? You want to make sure that the data that you have is extremely timely. You want to make sure there's basically zero latency if possible. So in scenarios where the mission's that important, quantum's extremely helpful in those sort of situations and scenarios. So at Nobles, we do a lot around flight optimization. We have a large contract with the FAA for that. We do a lot around advanced comms. Those are some of the areas when I'm looking at our top of funnel and identifying potential companies to dig into and due diligence on, that I'm kind of bucketing those quantum technologies into those kind of categories. And yeah, man, so we're looking at early stage companies that are kind of scratching those itches, so to speak.
And I know that you're, more on the investor side. So if you're not, privy on some of the deeper details on this specific use case, that's okay. We can jump over to Martine. But on the operator level for this use case scenario, is it, fewer delays? Is there safer spacing? Is it reduced fuel burn? Do you have any specifics on where that real world win comes into play here with the addition of quantum?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of reducing delays, right? We want to make sure that obviously the flight space is as safe as it could potentially be. But I think with the increase in routes and more people traveling, via airplane, like delays are extremely top of mind. I also think with weather patterns changing and derechos and unseasonable weather, like that also just adds to the complexity, right? But yeah, I think minimizing delays is definitely top of mind for the airports and the providers and the airlines as well.
Very cool. Quick shout out to our friends at Defense Unicorns. So, updating software on the F-22 used to mean grounding the jet, pulling panels, extracting the onboard computer, days of work, full maintenance crew. Defense Unicorns changed that. Now, a pilot can push updates from a tablet in minutes, and mission operators can fly, fix, and fly again with ease. Read the full case study at defenseunicorns.com/hatchit. Yeah, I want to pivot real quick to Martine, specifically around something that you brought up in our discovery, which I thought was really intriguing with Q99 about model decay and predictive intelligence. So let's flip it to your world, specifically around, model decay and predictive intelligence, because it's a different kind of problem. This idea that models decay daily. And that even like the best AI systems start becoming outdated the moment they're deployed. Walk us through this. What's a real moment where traditional AI just couldn't keep up, but your system was able to adapt it in real time.
I mean, if you want, I can tie both things together. I got something very cool.
Yeah,
from using quantum into training the models that we also use. So to Bill's point, when you are seeing AI and you start adding variables on top of variables and on top of variables and constraints and the whole shebang, then you hit kind of an exponential wall, right? Because it's like, hey, there's only so much compute that we can do. And then we got the cost versus time versus complexity. And that just skyrockets. And that's time, that's money. And the precision of those models, sometimes it's not enough for mission critical stuff like ATC, right? Air traffic control. So what we are doing, where we start to start designing the systems, is that when you're training an AI model, you use something that's called feature selection. You select kind of the right data to train a model. We're doing something that it's called quantum feature selection. So we're using quantum computers to train models. And the beauty about this is that we are using the nature of quantum mechanics, because what quantum does when you're looking at feature selection is that it amplifies the right solution and cancels out the wrong solution. So that's the beauty about quantum. And the performance that we are getting out of this, we benchmarked this metrics, and it's very interesting because what we accomplished, it's 13% reduction in training time, which it's not a crazy number, but when you're training a model and you're quantifying the amount of money and time that you're wasting into it or spending into it, it's a lot. But then the models when you measure model compression are 26% smaller, which is now it's a bigger number. And when we're talking about accuracy, our models are 24% more accurate than state of the art. And to give you an idea, usually model accuracy, you can go anywhere from 70% to 90% and probably a little bit more. The most accurate model that we've trained today using quantum on a pre-processing stage have been 99%. When you think about it, it's a crazy number. Now we're looking at ways of using quantum on a post-processing stage to get that number all the way up to 99.8%, which is mind-blowing. So going back to your initial question, most predictive systems don't fail because they are wrong. They fail because they are right about a world that no longer exists. They are trained on data that it's outdated, right? They've been training on data from the past. So when you talk about model decay, yes, starting models decay because they are trained on yesterday's patterns, but that doesn't mean the model is broken in a sense. The environment moved and the model didn't. That's the whole truth, right? So the real problem, it's not prediction, it's adaptation. So when we started evaluating this, we ask ourselves kind of a different question, right? What if the systems didn't need to be retrained? What if they could continuously re-understand the environment as it evolves? So that's where we started focusing on building kind of these models. Instead of learning a single task, the system learns how to learn from the environment itself. So when it sees a new variable or a new data point, it learns from that data point and stores it. And then now it has a new feature, right? To understand. And this is critical because a big part of the problem is that models treat data as rows and columns at the end of the day, if we go on the classical route. But in real systems, let's say in energy, towards your question around the impact, everything is interconnected. So if we represent a system of or a network of relationships at assets, variables, conditions, decisions, which is kind of the most important part of all, context on how you took a decision, and then track how those relationships evolve over time. Now, instead of predicting outcomes, we are modeling how the system behaves. And that gives us kind of the adaptation on, hey, instead of in this environment, the number of actions explodes combinatorially, such as in quantum, then we use that advanced feature selection and representation techniques to identify those interactions that matter. That's how we're using quantum on the post-processing stage to actually make kind of this self-evolving model. Because, for example, if we go back to energy, in oil and gas or renewables or any sort of energy that we're looking at, which is technically the national security, you are not optimizing for a single variable. We're balancing pressure, flow rates, equipment constraints, maintenance schedules. They are all interacting with each other. So it's not finding that key optimal point. It was continually adjusting to all those variables that are shifting in real time, right? Because if you got moving parts, a moving part can fail. And that's, at the end of the day, connecting back to those adaptive systems and how they outperform static models. Because you're not chasing the optimum, you're staying aligned with a moving system.
It makes me think about like legacy tech. Remember like the simple phrase of like crappy data, crappy output or whatever? Like it sounds like quantum is helping us crack that nut. Cause what you're saying, Martin, is like it having that high performance quantum compute allows you to constantly be reevaluating and looking at all the variables all at once to ensure that the data that you're ingesting is up to speed, up to snuff at any given second, right?
Yeah, it gives us the ability of balancing out the multiple interacting variables that for AI to analyze that, it will take a lot of time. So we can do it in quantum first and then train the model with that and having the model consider all those variables and learn, continually learn. So that gives us the adaptability and Manakat's self-evolving nature, uh, moving us from static prediction to adaptive understanding. And that's what drives the efficiency gains in the models.
Hey, Martin, this is reminding me of a kind of a concept that Tim and I have talked about with previous episodes around either digital twins or world models, right? Where when people hear those terms, sometimes they'll think of like, basically a 3D blueprint, but it's much more than that. It's exactly what you're talking about with interrelated complexity between multiple different data sets and features within a complex and evolving system. So it sounds to me like quantum is almost let's say, a better natural fit for world models and digital twins than trying to fit that or fit maybe sort of more classical machine learning techniques around digital twins and world models. Am I in the right direction with that? Are you seeing that with the work you're doing?
You're hitting the nail on the head. So yes, 100%. In fact, we spent almost a year in the lab with 8 PhDs doing research around this. And the interconnection was digital twins, world models from Jan LeCun mostly, which has been the one that has been talking about that for quite some time. And then quantum. And the other part, which has been kind of core to our research. So one of the problems that the industry itself has is that most models are black boxes. That's kind of our biggest challenge, right? With LLMs, with AI, you don't know how the prediction ended up being there, right? Because it's not giving you, hey, this is kind of the decisions I made to get here. So something that we've been working for quite some time is that how can we compose multiple AI paradigms, such as neural networks, probabilistic logic programming, temporal graph reasoning, logical neural networks, and more models. I'm not going to get into the details because it's going to get complicated, into a unified architecture with every decision, it's backed by a machine checkable proof trace. So the idea is that when you're encoding expert knowledge in or rules, let's say supply chain risk rules, medical contraindication logic from two different pills, financial compliance chains, or whatever you can imagine. I mean, we are technically agnostic, and so we can target any industry at the end of the day. But once you start analyzing all the reasoning tracing and rule refinements from production usage and all the system improving continuously, when you are expanding on that domain, that means better default rules. And it's kind of creating, if you think about it, a network effect within that vertical, right? Whatever vertical that is.
Oh, I just wanted to kind of dive a little bit deeper on some of these different industry use cases, because we talked a little bit about, air traffic. We talked about the energy systems, and it seems like there's, these common themes where, complexity is breaking, the traditional approach. So maybe we'll start with you, Bill, from the investor lens. What, and maybe deeper into defense or national security, where are some of those use cases that Noblest Ventures is seeing quantum having a real application?
Yeah, I mean, earlier mentioned advanced communications, right? That's an area of focus. I also think quantum sensing is something that fits really well into our portfolio in investments at Noblest Ventures. So our first investment we ever made back in 2023 was in a company called Scout Space, which is situational awareness in space, scalable situational awareness sensor. So it can be integrated on any satellite or bus. And the thesis being, if we can get enough of these sensors up in orbit, they can communicate with one another, sort of a mesh network to facilitate autonomy in space. But as you can imagine, if you have thousands of these sensors up in space that are gleaning and taking in data and looking for debris and actively tagging debris and other satellites in orbit, that's like managing a ton of data at once. So quantum sensing, I think, is an area that we're really interested in looking at. But going back to like Martin and Q99, like, because we're such a small check, and when I mean that, 500K to 2 million, like 2 million's our ceiling, we're not investing in a lot of like quantum hardware, right? Or like quantum computers. Like that kind of infrastructure takes, I don't know, Martin, you tell me, hundreds of millions of dollars, right? We'd be a drop in the bucket for that. So what we're really looking at is like applications and software, much like what Q99 is. So we could actually effectuate some benefits for our portfolio, right? We know we're not going to invest in the next IonQ, right? But we want to invest in companies where our dollars matter, where our expertise matters, right? We want to introduce our portfolio companies to our customer base. Noblest is prime on over 200 contracts. And part of our diligence is that, right? Finding that mission alignment. So in order for us to actually go into diligence, we need to see multiple prime contracts across multiple business units that we think can effectuate revenue for that company. And then at that point, we kind of dig a little bit deeper and bring in some of our SMEs and subject matter experts at Novus to help us vet that tech.
Very cool. Yeah, we need to get Scout on the pod. I know that I've had some interactions with some of their leadership, but yeah, what they're doing is really, really interesting. So would love to tap you for that future episode. Martin, what about yourself too, man? Like, what are you seeing? Yeah, I know that we kind of went down the rabbit hole of logistics and supply chain over coffee, but maybe highlight, for the listeners where you're seeing those use cases.
Yeah, so let's jump into the logistics use case, which is super interesting. So we worked with one of the world's biggest logistics company, well, in Germany's largest logistics company, where they cover thousands of kilometers or miles in daily routes. We were able to reduce that by 6%. So that means 225 kilometers a day. When you think about the 225 kilometers a day, it doesn't sound like much, but I'm going to give you something that it's going to blow your mind. That's 82,000 kilometers a year. That's 2 trips around the earth. Just think about that. 2 trips around the earth. And the interesting part is not just the amount of money that we save them, which is in the large millions. It's also that we call it secondary effects. The secondary effects of that saving, obviously, it's emissions. Obviously, Germany cares that a lot. It's reducing maintenance costs. We were able to reduce the maintenance costs by 25%. That's yearly maintenance costs. And since the company has a very modern fleet, we were able to expand kind of the life cycle of the vehicle by 15%. And this is considering, again, a new fleet. Once you go kind of backwards and focus on older fleets, actually the number skyrockets. But in practical numbers, these are crazy numbers. And we accomplished that actually with Quantum. It started with when we started this is something crazy. When we tried an AI model and a quantum model side to side with the same things, we didn't get much advantage on the quantum side. And that's a reality. But we discovered that, and this has been a research that has been ongoing for a few years now. We discovered that once you start quantum, its nature, it's complex, right? Actually, Feynman said that if you think you understand quantum, you're full of crap. Once you start understanding, you're more confused than before, which is true. So once we started adding complexity to the equation, a lot of constraints and a lot of different things, that's when the actual solution started working. We added all the constraints that you could imagine, and that's how we got fantastic results. And here's something interesting. It was a 30-minute runtime that took us every morning to run all the optimized routes, which wasn't acceptable for the business because go make a German come to work 30 minutes before. I mean, that's how we Americans, we don't mind about it, but Europeans, they're like, yeah, no way I'm coming 30 minutes before to work. So they said, hey, this is not working. But I said, dude, isn't it? I mean, I just saved you a ton of daily kilometers and a ton of millions. So it is working. Oh, yeah, but it's not acceptable for us. We cannot run this for 30 minutes. And we were like, okay, can you invest some more money? And we'll try our best to pretty much make that number go down significantly. They said, okay, let's do it. So we transitioned part of that workload into another quantum computer, a different technology, and we were able to reduce the number to 7 minutes. And they were like, okay, I can run this 7 minutes every morning before our shipments go out. So that's a very interesting use case because we are using NISQ era computers, NOC intermediate scale quantum computers. So computers that we have right now, that we can use right now, applied to this logistics traveling salesman problem and solving kind of a real world problem as we speak. That's happening.
That's what I want to touch on quickly, Martin. And sorry for interrupting you, but like when I look at and evaluate tech, like I want something that's deployable today. right? And I think the biggest misconception with quantum is like, hey, like I don't have access to this quantum computer. You know the one I'm talking about, like the IBM one. You know, it's like hanging from the ceiling. It's like enclosed and all like in a cryogenic chamber, right? Like all this like high tech stuff. And I'm like, look, I just want some software and some tech that we can deploy today that can benefit Noblis's customers today. And when I talked to Martine, that's what Q99 is doing. That's what some of the other companies we're looking for and engaging with right now are doing. But Martine, can you quickly address that and just talk about some of the misconceptions where people think that quantum's out of reach, right? But it in reality, there's use cases and ways that it can be leveraged with existing legacy technology, right, and infrastructure.
100%. I always say that for some things, quantum, it's limited because obviously we got a certain number of qubits, and quantum has a PR problem. They've been making promises for the past, 50 years? Not in vain, because as every technology, it has its velocity. Now, for the past, let's say, decade, we've been seeing the acceleration thanks to AI, because AI is accelerating quantum, and quantum, it AI unlocked, let's say, scientists are going to kill me for this, but AI unlocked quantum, which for the past few years, that's why we have seen the acceleration that we have seen. But at the same time, quantum, it's the unlock on around power that we need for AI. So Bill here brought something that is very interesting. People think that quantum computers don't exist or they still have 8 qubits. We got a lot of different quantum technologies. I mean, we got IBM, which is superconducting qubits. That's a certain technology. And again, don't kill the messenger. At the end of the day, putting it simply, imagine an Intel i9 chip. Again, IBM, don't kill me. Sorry about this. Being frozen, all that sexy golden tower that you see, it's the cryogenics. So that's pretty much what they're doing. It's getting that chip closer to as close as they can to absolute zero. So atoms or subatomic particles are stable. And that's what gives us the processing power and the amount of time that we need. But then, for example, that consumes orders of magnitude less power than classical systems or GPU farms or data centers. But for example, Bill also mentioned IonQ. IonQ, it's just a rack that operates at room temperature. And listen to that number. IonQ, I think it only consumes around 12 to 25 kilowatts, which is insane. It's tens of orders of magnitude less than a usual data center. Imagine if we can unlock this technology and get it to a certain number of qubits where we can process a ton of data. Our power consumption, water consumption, a lot of natural resources that we would need, they would decrease considerably. So the technology, it's really game changing. And now we are seeing the acceleration. So to Bill's point, technology is still limited by the amount of qubits, but the amount of qubits are accelerating supposedly, or what we expect, or what companies are promising, is that by 2030, we will have fault tolerant computers. That means that we will be able to tap into a bigger amount of qubits. That means tapping into more data and getting these qubits tolerant for more time, because now we got noise, and obviously that decoheres, and we can get technical, and it presents all sorts of problems. But the industry is accelerating. I mean, NVIDIA last week, I think it was, or 2 weeks ago, it had NVIDIA Q Day where they released the NVIDIA Ising models, which are particularly open source models destined to help researchers manage noise. And this takes us back to AI accelerating quantum computing, right? It's not that it's maybe accelerating to find new materials, which is also, it's doing it, but it's also helping us understand and manage that noise. And a practical use case, this for some reason didn't get the coverage that it needed to get, but I think it was 2024, 2025, Department of Energy worked with Microsoft to find new battery materials. I think the number was around like 34 million different materials.
Crazy.
By partnering with Microsoft and doing obviously this chemistry and running on a quantum computer with Microsoft, by doing a 80-hour runtime, I think it was, they decreased that number from 34 million to 25 potential materials. And then from those 25, they decreased that to 2. Like 80 hours. It would take classical computers probably decades or more to actually analyze. And that didn't get the coverage that it needed to get.
That's insane. I think something interesting, Martin, because like the thread you keep on pulling, but you haven't said it like explicitly, is like this symbiotic relationship between AI and quantum, which I think is interesting. But it also sounds like there are a little bit of competing interests, because you mentioned like if you can leverage quantum compute, then it kind of makes some of the legacy data centers in chips that powers those data centers obsolete in some way. I don't know, maybe I'm misspeaking in a way, but it brings me back to didn't you all know better than I do? Wasn't there some sort of announcement that was made by Jensen Huang like late last year or mid last year that kind of sent the quantum world in a tailspin? Like, can we touch on that real quick and like help me understand what actually went down there? Because I saw the news headlines. I didn't, I was working on deals and doing other stuff, but what was going on there?
You're poking the bear here. I mean, it was something that pretty much it was super interesting because he said that last year, and it sent all stocks on a very bearish trajectory. But then he took it back. A few months later, he said, "Oh yeah, well, he pissed all quantum vendors," and he said, "No, quantum computing is advancing." He said, "Oh, it's going to take 30 years." But I mean, for example, talking again about IonQ and quantum encryption, which is kind of the latest password. We're breaking encryption, we're breaking ECC and RSA and the whole shebang. Or if you think about it, the 3 days ago or a few days ago, IonQ launched a definitive roadmap that it's called the Walking Cat. That's the name of the paper on how to actually get to the amount of qubits needed to break encryption. So it's happening. I mean, it's accelerating. And yesterday I was pitching a VC, and one of the questions was like, how do you see your company or the world 2 years from now, 3 years from now? I don't have a clue. A few years ago, I could probably answer that question. Right now, I don't know. Because if you hear, for example, not long ago, Boris Cherny from Anthropic was on a podcast, I think. YC invited him, and he said, if we startups should think 6 months ahead, and I totally disagree with that. Right now, startups should think years ahead. That's one of the reasons why we're working with quantum. But Boris was saying, if we don't have the capability right now, we'll probably have it in 1 month. And if we don't have it in 1 month, we're having it in 6. So a startup, in a sense, it's like, okay, if I'm building something and Anthropic launches a new technology, it's going to kill me. So that's why probably the confusion around, or I don't know if it was a play by Jensen or what happened there, but he retracted later on and saying that the quantum technology wouldn't advance. And just see all the latest NVIDIA announcements on Q-Day. They are full speed ahead doing AI models that help quantum computing get better and faster and everything that we requires. And I don't think quantum it's ever going to replace classical. What I think, and it's what you just mentioned, Bill, it's always going to be this symbiotic relationship of one helping the other.
Yeah, it sounds like, this common theme of this hybrid model where quantum plus classical is kind of like the only viable path right now anyways. Sean, lead up, because I know that the cyber and quantum conversation is interesting. I know that you had a question you wanted to tee up on that.
So Martin, I know that you've got an established background in cybersecurity, and we would be missing the topicality if we didn't talk about Mythos, the Anthropic unreleased cyber model, but then also quantum models and what they could do for encryption. So take that wherever you like, but love to hear your thoughts on it.
Oof, you're killing me here. I mean,
it scares the shit out of people, so we'd love to hear more about it.
Wants to get their hands on that model. I think it's going to change a lot, but it's also natural for this to happen, right? We as humans have a limited bandwidth. AI doesn't. So this was supposed to happen. How can we find, let's say, 0 days, because at the end of the day, they are 0 days, on software that has been around, that's massive and had thousands of variations, without having the entire context around it or knowing the entire code base or coding language? That was bound to happen. It will keep happening. That's why they are just holding it back, right? It's like, okay, let's give this to, let's say, banks or national security or whatever, so they can start using and uncovering the vulnerabilities so we can fix them. So later on, we can open it up to the world, and the world is pissed because they got this massive numbers that they are getting and we cannot use them, not just to protect ourselves, also to keep developing and having all the different use cases. But when you inject quantum into that equation and having the power to break encryption, if we see kind of the NIST guidelines, NSA guidelines, and European guidelines around encryption, it's a moving target, because it started by saying 2035, then it moved to 2033, then to 2030. Then a few weeks ago, Google and Cloudflare said we're moving our target to 2029. And IonQ a few days ago say we're going to move the target to 2028. And this all thanks to AI. AI, it's accelerating this, because it's not that we are getting to it's not just the number of qubits that we are going to get to break encryption or asymmetric encryption for now. It's also that AI and the capacity of the AI models that we are seeing are accelerating this timeline. And what concerns me the most is that if you see the actual numbers, just 5% of the companies in the world are preparing for this. And pretty much moving from classical encryption to post-quantum encryption or post-quantum cryptography, it's going to take 1 to 7 years for each and every company out there. Which it's like, oh yeah, it's going to take, yeah, because it's not just you. It's all the dependencies that you got to third-party software that if they don't have an actual plan, what's going to happen? Because you depend on them. It's not just your network or your communications. And I always propose the next question. It's when we break classical encryption, post-quantum PQC, it's kind of in the middle before we move to QKD, quantum key distribution, right? But it's like, is PQC going to hold? We don't know that yet.
Yeah, Bill, what do you kind of hear on the investor side, on like the federal or, national security side customers? What are they thinking about or feeling about the future of cyber, sensitive information, stuff like that?
I think everyone's freaked out. I think it's something that's top of mind, right? We want to have, the best technology for our government customers to circumvent any bad actors, right? I think it's something that people are really, really, really concerned about. I wanted to quickly pivot and talk about something completely different, if that's cool with you, Tim.
Yeah, go for it.
That I talked to Martin about, because for an early stage investor like Nobles Ventures, we're really hyper focused on the team, right? The founders, the foundational team. But because quantum is so frontier tech, you don't have serial quantum entrepreneurs. There just aren't many out there. And from what I'm seeing is we're seeing folks with cyber backgrounds, maybe exited founders in the cyber space, engaged with a few folks that are coming from space backgrounds. But from your point of view, Tim, like when you look at the talent side of this, Like, are you seeing the majority of new quantum founders coming from cyber? I mean, it sounds like it's a path that makes a lot of sense, but are you seeing other industries and other verticals where people are coming from and then moving into quantum? I thought that was kind of
Yeah, I mean, honestly, we don't see a ton of new quantum startups kind of popping off. The few that we do, I'd say that they come from more of a domain expertise, if that's in like finance, or cyber is a big one as well, or potentially like space tech. But it's rare to see anybody that's just coming from a pure kind of quantum background and then just launching something. So I think it kind of also plays back into this overarching theme that we see, that's more of this combination, this hybrid model where it's still like on the classical side and then slow playing quantum into this kind of hybrid theme. But
we discussed this with Bill, and probably there's only one founder, which is a multi-time founder in the quantum space, and that's Chad Rigetti. He founded Rigetti Computing, and now he founded another company. That's probably the only person in the world which is a multi-time founder, a quantum founder.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's a great question to pose, because I think it translates into a lot of other industries, or specifics in like AI, right? Where they're looking for, developer talent that's, progressive and cutting edge, when, you're only looking at some of these engineers that have had access to some of the most progressive models over the last couple of years. It's just your talent pool is so limited. And so when I look at a company like IonQ, I'm perplexed on how they exercise their recruiting strategy and what type of talent they're looking for and what background translates. Cause I think that's a great question, because it feeds over to the founder question too, of, the next wave that are starting these companies. And I think too that, this is a question that I had, for you, Bill, because I think, when you're talking to, the next wave of founders that you're looking to invest in, how do you educate, some of those national security customers on these emerging technologies like quantum? Because I feel like, again, it's such a great area for a lot of these customers.
I think you gotta dip your toe, right? I think you gotta find technology that leverages legacy infrastructure. Because if you go 0 to 100, like, you're gonna scare people away, right? So I think that's kind of the key. And I think, our Nobles's customers also like the stage at which we invest, right? I think that kind of level sets expectations. And what I would tell all quantum founders out there is, make sure you're doing diligence on the VCs that you're engaging and trying to reach out to and try to set up time with. Because, for instance, just to bring it back to other verticals that we play in, right? AI, for instance, like, we wouldn't invest in a Perplexity or an OpenAI, right? We would just be a drop in the bucket, and it's not something we would invest in, just given our check size of 500K to 2 million being the ceiling. We wouldn't invest in launch companies for space, right? Because it's too capital intensive. But the application layer, the software, the high margin startups that are servicing AI and space and quantum, that leverage, for quantum's example, leveraging legacy infrastructure, that is an area we can play in, right? Because they tend to be a little bit more capital efficient, and a little bit more accessible to funds like us and funds that are our size, right?
Yeah, it's good feedback. And Martin, I'm curious, as a serial entrepreneur yourself, what kind of advice do you give to, those product-minded, technical founders that are listening, when they're thinking about taking those steps towards to this space? What do you kind of recommend when they're dipping their toe in that water?
Oh, I'm not the kind of person that dips her toe. I'm kind of the kind of person that goes to the deeper part and just jumps in. So
Cannonball.
it ties back to my childhood. So when I was a kid, I'm probably that's probably my mom's fault. When I was a kid, I was scared of the deep part of the pool when I was learning to swim. So the teacher said to my mom, "Hey, he won't jump into the pool on the deeper part of it." So she came in, push me into the water, the deeper part, and that's probably the rest is history. I'm a very particular person. Actually, my background, as I mentioned, it comes from offensive security. I didn't have a clue around quantum, aside from what I read on Feynman's books or any of the classical books that us mortals read. And I just jumped in and started learning as much as I could. So that gives you kind of the image. Just go for it. The, we have a saying in Spanish, and it's the translation will be something like, the worst diligence, it's the one that you don't do. So just go for it, try it, and if it fails, you'll know that you'll sleep with having your head and saying, hey, at least I tried. 99% of people don't try. So
Yeah, but Martin, you're not giving yourself enough credit. I think, we opened this conversation with Tim saying, like, Bill, you're always out and about at all the events. I mean, you're at a lot of the events I'm at, Martin. You are always grinding and out in the market and building relationships, because that's super important, right? It's super important to know that you're, especially in something like quantum, which is so confusing to many people, right? And people think it's super technical and they're like, I don't invest in quantum. But Martin, when you engage some of these investors and you actually explain the use cases and what you're doing and how you're engaging with customers and the value you're providing them, and the value you're providing them today, I think it opens up a lot of VCs' minds and saying, oh yeah, this is something I definitely could see myself investing in and consider investing in. But I think it's important to get out there and just keep beating the drum and keep talking to folks and shaking hands.
Well, and Martin, and the stories that you told me when we met for coffee, I mean, gave me anxiety. Like the level of stress that you have been through over your journey. I mean, that's just where that founder grit plays such a huge part in, that determination to just kind of keep going when, a lot of people might doubt you and, going through pitches and people are, saying no, but, kind of sticking to your roots and committing to what you believe in, I think is really credible. So
it's
kudos to you, man.
Actually, before jumping into this company, this is the third company that I've been through since I got married with my wife 7 years and a few days ago. Before jumping, I was like, hey, are you in? Because this is going to be a wild ride. So, yep. I got kind of the green light for her to actually do this, because to your point, it's hard. And when you think things couldn't get harder, they get exponentially harder. So
yeah. Well, kudos, man. Keep grinding, man. It sounds like you're doing some breakthrough work, so we're excited to track it. Before we put a bow on the conversation, I just wanted to kind of again, tap a little bit more from you, Bill, on, we get a lot of early stage founders tuning in, building something. A lot of those are, maybe commercial, looking for that viable, dual use case as well to break into the government. When you're looking at companies and considering an investment, you talked a little bit about the founders, right? Obviously a huge piece. How do you kind of break down or weigh between, the founders, the tech, and the use case?
It's a good question. I mean, founders is always important because you're going to be in the trenches working alongside these people, right? So you want to make sure that you have a lot of faith in those individuals, because they're the ones that are grinding every day and that are going through it. But I think the use case is something that's extremely important, Tim. And I think people get a little bit confused when they engage with and when they're working with dual use venture capitalists and VC firms. What we love seeing is companies that have commercial traction, maybe in the regulated industries, that have a desire to sell to the government, because we can be that conduit. We can be that bridge, right? As I mentioned, Noblest has over 200 prime contracts. So we have like deep knowledge and understanding of what our customer needs are. And we know what Noblest can do and what Noblest can't do. So the ventures group at Noblest very much is in many ways a tech scouting platform, right? It helps us kind of see around corners, because we do, our parent company Noblest does a lot of IRAD, right? And I had a conversation with our CTO last week, and it's like, hey, Bill, if you see some really interesting tech, and we're kind of developing some in-house IP, like let's have a conversation and really weigh, are we going to be earmarking this funding to continue going down this path, or should we invest in those companies and partner with them? Right. But I think for us, like our sweet spot is really finding and identifying companies that have some commercial traction with a desire to sell to the government, and we can be that partner and that Sherpa for that journey. And I think something that's a little bit unique about Nobles Ventures compared to some other corporate venture groups is that we go a little bit early. So a lot of CVCs kind of go Series A and beyond, because we're smaller compared to some of our competitors. We do punch above our weight, right? But we're right about, I think, around 750 million in revenue. But what that means is that some of those smaller contracts mean something to us. You know, some of the big dogs, and I don't want to say any names, the multi-billion-dollar revenue prime contractors, they don't care about a $5 or $10 million contract, right? We do. So what that means is that we kind of skew a little bit earlier than some of our competitors. And that means that we're able to access technology that's a little bit more cutting edge than some of those other folks. Some of those technologies that might be overlooked because they don't have that traction yet, but we can help them get that traction. And it goes back to Scout, who will get on the pod for sure, Tim, but we were the first institutional check in Scout. I think prior to engaging with them, they raised about $2.5 million in total funding, and we came in with a $2 million check off the bat. And we've made this month, we're going to make our fourth investment in that company. So we're continuing to support them in their growth journey. But I think what's unique about Nobles Ventures is we go a little bit earlier than some of the other CVCs out there. So it's exciting work, and it's great to work side by side with these founders that are just grinding it out, you know?
Yeah, it's some of the most exciting times too. I mean, the most chaos, but you know, your ability to add the most value in those early stages. So good stuff. Well, yeah, I mean, we'll put a bow on the main conversation here. I feel like, again, like things are moving so fast. We could run a follow-up episode in 3 months, and you know, God knows what news is going to come out. But let's put a bow on the main discussion and wrap with a closing segment. We call it the 5-second scramble. So rapid fire Q&A. Try to keep the answer, you know, fairly brief. Sean, why don't you lead us off with Bill, and then I'll close with Martine.
You bet. All right, Bill, you ready?
Yeah, let's rock.
Okay. What's the best leadership advice you've ever received?
Transparency.
Great. What's the most surprising skill that you've had to learn in your career?
Patience.
Well, very
I'm trying to do one words, or like I'm trying to keep
you can short. Expand a little bit. Yeah, you can.
You're crushing it so far. You're really hearing the 5-second rule. And I also liked how you were transparent about saying you need to learn patience. So no, let's keep it going. What's a common piece of advice that you disagree with?
Patience. No, I mean, like Martine said, like bias for action, right? Like, I think as an early stage investor, you have to be patient. It takes a little bit longer to maybe get to market or get your stride. But again, like bias for action, like you can't sit idle. You need to be grinding and constantly moving and constantly doing stuff and constantly experimenting. So it's kind of like a two-sided coin, I think.
So let me follow up on that then. If you meet a founding team that's a little bit more like a bull in the china shop, does that kind of capture your interest more than a more, you know, strategic, quote unquote strategic, or like kind of cerebral kind of founding attitude, or does it depend on more than just that?
It depends on more than just that. I think I get attracted to maybe the more cerebral because I myself am a bull in the china shop, and it can get a little bit crazy if we get bulls in the china.
Only room for one bull.
Exactly. But no, I think, you know, technical founders, it's intriguing, especially for like dual use and deep tech ventures. But then you see someone like Martin, right, who does a little bit of both. He's an expert in cyber and quantum, but he's out there grinding. So I think it's a balance.
Awesome. All right, those are the harder 5-second scramble questions. Get a little easier now. What's the best under $20 piece of swag you've ever received?
Dude, I mean, honestly, like Tervises are pretty legit. Like I like Tervises because like I'm always drinking beverages, dude. Like I got this, my little thing. I got my pitcher of water over here. Bad boy saved up for later.
Oh
right?
yeah.
I like cups. You know, we have to purge every once in a while because we just get too many cups, accrue too many cups. But you can't go wrong with a good Tervis.
Perfect. If you could have a superpower for one day, what would that superpower be? And it can't be time travel, of course.
Yeah, other than time travel, I think it would be sick to fly, like just fly around. Like teleportation would be kind of sick, but I feel like actually flying, like the act of doing it, kind of exciting and cool. So I like flying because you'll just be able to get around faster.
Perfect. If you could automate away one part of your weekly or your daily routine, what would it be?
Calendar stuff.
You know, that's like the
company that did that. Yeah,
I had it. I needed an invest.
In trouble with my wife this morning. She's like, "Hey, that event next week, you didn't add it to the calendar." I'm like, "Sorry, honey, I'll add it." She's like, "Look, the system only works if you leverage it correctly." I'm like, "Okay, I will. I promise you, Ange, I will be better with the calendar."
There will never not be calendar apps and calendar companies for as long as there is time. There's always going to be a new generation of them.
I don't know, Sean. Right, mine died, and it was freakishly good.
And well, I'm waiting for it was DOS Calendar, right?
Yep.
I'm waiting for 2.0, Martin. Sorry. I'll be your first angel investor. I'll give you $10 whole.
I got you.
All right, Bill. What's a product or service that you use that's either cheap or free that you can't believe is cheap or free because it's so good?
ChatGPT.
Yeah, honestly, that's becoming a pretty ubiquitous answer. You might have to retire that question. What's the strangest place you've
Spotify too? I love Spotify. I mean, but we pay for Spotify, but it's super cheap. But like, it's absolutely like I'm always right after this. I've got my Beats speaker over here. Like I need music to like keep the vibes up. Spotify's great too.
Yeah, that's a good point. What's the strangest place you've ever had to take an important work call?
I mean, I'm always taking them in the car. Strange. I mean, we recently moved. At our old house was super, super tight. And there were times that the kids were home and that Angie was working from home. And I would literally be in our like utility closet basement with like bicycles hanging behind my head. I'm like trying to convince this investor to come in on this round. And they're like, "Dude, why are there like bikes hanging behind your head?" And I'm like, quiet room in the house. But it's hilarious when you're literally trying to get like $1 million investment from a VC, and they're like, "Dude, where are you, man?
Where are you, dude?"
Utility closet in the basement of my house.
Awesome. All right, and then our final question here on the 5-second scramble: what is a charity or a corporate philanthropy effort that's near and dear to your heart that you want our listeners to know about?
Yeah, it's a good question. We do a lot with a group called the Heart Mountain Foundation. So check out heartmountain.org. There is a interpretive learning center in Cody, Wyoming. It's near and dear to my heart because my grandparents, Bill and Sets Higuchi, met there during World War II. So check out heart.org.
Awesome. Bill, you crushed it. Crushed the 5-second scramble. And we'll send it over to Tim and Martin.
Good stuff. Good patience on that scramble, Bill. All right, Martin, you ready?
Let's do it.
If Q99 were an animal, what kind of animal would it be?
Ooh, snow leopard.
Oh, snow leopard. Solid. What kind of roles is Q99 hiring for maybe over the next 3 to 6 months?
data scientists and quantum engineers.
Okay. What's one thing about the culture at Q99 that would surprise folks looking to join?
That's a very good one. I think openness.
Nice. It's a great trait. As a serial entrepreneur, what's one piece of advice that you'd give your younger self starting your first business?
I would say, given everything that I went through, it would be take care of yourself.
Yeah, you can't do too much if the vessel's damaged, right? You gotta keep that mind right.
I always say, and I learned this the hard way. There's one reason of why when you're traveling by plane, they tell you first put on your mask to help others. So that's very important.
Yeah, good call. Do you have a favorite, business or leadership book or podcast that you recommend to early stage founders?
I have a book, $1 Trillion Coach by Bill Campbell. Fantastic book.
Taking some notes on it. What was your very first job?
My very first job? I started very early on building the famous clone computers and selling them to my parents' friends. I was like 7 years old. So
7 years old.
You can consider that a job. I was making money.
Hey,
so
dude, you're like a kindergartner peddling computers. That's pretty sick. I was selling Beanie Babies when I was like 15, but you were doing some advanced stuff.
Yeah, I was selling a lawn service at 12, man. Makes me feel like a mope.
I did clone computers too. The whole thing back then was getting like a good graphics card and selling it to your gamer friends so they could play like Doom 3 when that came out. So Martin, I'm right there with you.
What's a favorite place for you to kind of travel globally?
France.
Nice. What's an activity that helps you completely, unplug from the world of startups?
Oh, martial arts, jiu-jitsu and Muay Thai.
Nice. And closing question, what's a charity or corporate philanthropy that's near and dear to you?
So it depends. I like to change things a bit. So, the Netflix show Traveling with Phil or Phil something, I don't remember the name. So Phil travels around the world eating different kinds of food, and he partners with a lot of different philanthropic initiatives. So I usually go there and choose one that has a good cause and collaborate with that. It could be feeding people. Also, coming from Argentina, I have a really good connection. So every year, what I do at the beginning of the school year, I donate all the materials for kids, around 30 kids, 35 kids every year, all the school materials for the entire year.
Oh, dude, that's awesome. Very cool. Yeah, appreciate you guys sharing that. Martin, Bill, it's a great conversation. And again, just on quantum at large, I feel like it's, again, one of those spaces where the story, hasn't quite caught up to the reality yet. So a lot to stay tuned into. But I think conversations like these are how we, start to close that gap every day. So appreciate you all joining us and appreciate you jumping on the pod.
Thank you for having us, guys. That was awesome.
Thanks for having us. It was a lot of fun.